I didn't expect to see her. Not there. Not like that. The glass doors of Orion Logic hissed shut behind me as I stepped onto the polished floor of the 14th level. Everything smelled like eucalyptus and filtered ambition. Clean, efficient, and different. I had been practicing this moment for weeks. My resume was freshly printed, pressed flat inside a cobalt blue folder. The heels I wore were scuffed, yes, but polished. My coat too thin for a Minnesota March morning. But I smiled anyway, the way you smile when you've convinced yourself that preparation can outshine legacy. The receptionist had barely acknowledged me as she handed over the temporary badge. "Assessment room C," she muttered, pointing down a hallway that felt longer than it should have. I nodded and thanked her softly, maybe too softly. My voice never sounded the right volume in places like this. As I walked past the glass panels, I caught glimpses of the candidates already inside. Sharp suits, sleek hair, laughter that echoed in short bursts. I straightened my spine, forced my breath to slow. One of them looked up, then away. I took the only empty seat, a little too far from the center of the circle, just close enough to be tolerated, not quite close enough to matter. Then the door clicked. My fingers froze on the folder in my lap. She entered with the unmistakable rhythm of someone who believed every room owed her its silence. Navy blouse tucked into slate gray trousers. Hair in a bun so tight it looked like a sculpture. A gold name tag gleamed beneath her collarbone. Aubrey Whitmore, Director, Systems Innovation. My sister. She didn't blink when our eyes met. No hesitation. No flicker of acknowledgement. She just walked to the far end of the table, set her travel mug down, a brushed steel thermos that probably cost more than my weekly groceries, and took her seat as if I didn't exist. My breath caught, but I didn't let it break. Not yet. I remembered the last time I'd seen her, at a dinner for my mother's birthday. Aubrey had shown up 40 minutes late and still managed to take over the conversation in 5. She'd toasted to family resilience while smiling straight at me, knowing damn well I'd just lost a freelance contract she'd accidentally undercut. That night, she wore the same perfume she was wearing now, sharp floral, expensive. The HR coordinator began to speak. Introductions, expectations, something about agility and innovation pipelines, but the words slid past me like water. My focus narrowed to the way Aubrey tapped her pen against the table. 3 short clicks, then a pause. The same pattern she'd used when we shared a room as children, and she'd try to drive me mad while pretending to study. I was no longer 12, but I felt 12. Small, invisible, sitting in a circle of strangers, while the one person who knew me best worked her magic on them before I even spoke. "Coffee, anyone?" An assistant asked, holding a tray. It made its rounds. Every person took a cup. Except me. The tray passed, and my hand stayed empty. I said nothing. Then I saw it, the smirk curling at the corner of Aubrey's mouth as she leaned toward the woman beside her. She whispered something behind her mug, and the woman let out a soft, practiced laugh. "She still dresses like she shops in college clearance bins," Aubrey said, just loud enough to sting. My face didn't move. My eyes stayed on the wood grain table. But something inside me folded into itself. I inhaled slowly, then exhaled. This wasn't about coffee, or clothes, or even the job. It was about erasure, again. And what I didn't know then, but would come to realize in the hours that followed, was that this wasn't just another failed interview. It was the last time I would ever ask for permission to be seen. They began calling names. One by one, the candidates rose, clean silhouettes in expensive tailoring, voices smooth with years of being told they belonged. As they spoke, buzzwords floated like perfume: scalable frameworks, cross-functional leadership, agile deployment. Aubrey nodded at each one, scribbling notes with the same red pen that had once corrected my science homework with ruthless delight. When my name was called, Lana Cross, she didn't even glance up. I rose anyway. My folder felt heavier than before, but my steps were even. I placed the resume at the center of the table, right in front of her. She picked it up like it was a napkin someone had left behind, flipped through it for exactly 3 seconds, then passed it to the man on her left, Miles Kenner, VP of Product. He glanced at it, blinked once, then set it aside. That was it. No questions, no reaction, no interest. I returned to my chair. The room went on. Someone behind me coughed. I stared at the grain of the table again. Aubrey's perfume seemed stronger now, like a warning. Or a verdict. Then I heard it. A voice, low but not careful, from behind me. She's here? Didn't think she was even in tech anymore. And then Aubrey laughed. Not loud, but real. And sharp. It sliced right through me. I didn't flinch. I didn't give her the satisfaction. But something inside me, something small and tired, curled tighter, like it had been bracing for this exact impact all along. I adjusted the folder in my lap and remembered the hours I spent at 2 a.m. on a borrowed laptop, teaching myself data architecture while my ex-boyfriend called it a cute little phase. The time Aubrey forwarded my portfolio to the wrong client on my birthday. And the month after, when my bank balance hit double digits and my father joked, well, Lana's always been the artistic one. That's code for unemployed, right? I was done pretending any of this didn't hurt. The final candidate had just sat down when Miles leaned back in his chair and pointed his pen lazily in my direction. So, he said, like he was addressing someone's niece at Thanksgiving, what makes you think you're ready for the big leagues? The smirk told me this wasn't curiosity. This was sport. I opened my mouth to answer, but Aubrey moved faster. She reached across the table and snatched my resume again, clicked her pen, the red one, and began to write. From where I sat, I could see the strokes. Wrong major, wrong look, wrong fit. Then, at the very bottom, in a sharp block of crimson ink, unqualified. She didn't say it aloud. She didn't need to. She slid the paper across the polished table, like she was laying down a piece of evidence, a sentence, a prophecy. I didn't blink. I didn't reach for it. I just sat there, feeling the heat rise up the back of my neck. I cleared my throat. I led an AI ethics redesign for 3 mid-tier platforms last year, I said, voice steady, and scaled a predictive system that cut client processing times by 34%. That framework is currently, Aubrey cut in with a syrupy chuckle, still chasing those little dream projects, she said, looking past me. While I was presenting at a summit in London, she was still uploading resumes on Indeed. There were snickers now, quiet but unmistakable. One came from Nina Patel, HR, another from the assistant who'd ignored me earlier. It was happening again, but I didn't shrink. Instead, I looked at her, not at the director of innovation, not at the polished, flawless, boardroom version of my sister, but at Aubrey, the girl who used to read my journal aloud to her friends for fun, the one who told me I wasn't pretty enough for high school elections or clever enough for debate team, the sister who needed me invisible so she could shine undisturbed. And I realized something. She didn't dismiss me because I was unqualified. She dismissed me because I had finally stopped needing her to approve me. I turned away, not in defeat, but because I already knew the real answer to Miles's question. What makes me think I'm ready? Simple. I stopped waiting for rooms like this to tell me so. By the time the session ended, no one looked my way. Not even the assistant, who'd snickered. Not Nina, who had scribbled her notes without once meeting my eyes. And certainly not Aubrey, who now sipped from her mug like it held victory in ceramic form. The silence wasn't cruel. It was calculated, polished, just like them. I stood, gathered my things, and left the room as quietly as I had entered. No one stopped me. No one called out, not even to say goodbye. The building's air changed once I hit the elevator. It smelled less like performance and more like recycled air and janitorial wax. I pressed the button for the lobby and watched my reflection blur in the stainless steel walls. I didn't cry. I just walked, out through the rotating doors, into the Minneapolis wind. Sharp, gray, mid-March, unforgiving. My blazer flapped open. I didn't fix it. My heels echoed along 3rd Street like I belonged somewhere else, though I no longer knew where that was. 2 blocks later, I ducked into North Loop Bean House, a place that always smelled like burned espresso and broken deadlines. It was mostly empty, except for a grad student with 3 laptops and a barista who didn't lift his head when I ordered. Just a drip, I said. To go. Medium. I didn't drink it. I just needed a reason to sit at the far table by the window, the one with the chipped edge and the view of the crosswalk. I slid into the seat, took a breath, and pulled the resume folder from my bag. It was still warm from my lap. The red ink stared back at me, bleeding through the back cover like a slow leak, like it had been waiting for me to admit something. Unqualified. The word sat there like a bruise, one I'd seen before. And just like that, I was back in 2016, sitting on the floor of my old apartment in St. Paul, my legs numb, a takeout box half-eaten beside me. I'd just finished a 6-week freelance job for a nonprofit, my first big pitch deck built from scratch. It had taken everything I had. I'd been proud of it. I showed it to Aubrey one night over wine. She was working for a boutique tech consultancy then. She had said, "This is cute. You always have such creative little ideas." I didn't think much of it until her firm released a nearly identical proposal a month later, presented at a conference with her name at the top. She hadn't stolen it. Not directly. That was the brilliance. I didn't say it was mine, she'd told me at Mom's birthday dinner. But if people connect the dots, that's not my fault. That job had gone to someone else. A man Aubrey had recommended. And I spent weeks trying to explain to confused executives why my concept had already been launched without me. I remembered the sound of my father laughing that night, glass raised. To my daughters! Aubrey, the visionary, and Lana, the kind one. Kind. It had stuck to me like a participation ribbon. The word you give women when you don't want to say they failed. Back in the cafe, I blinked hard. The present came back in fragments, the clatter of the espresso machine, the rumble of tires over slush outside, the faint hum of a Spotify playlist built for rainy days. My phone buzzed. A new email. From Elias Everhart. Subject, how did it go? I stared at the screen. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard. I started to type. It went exactly the way she wanted it to. Then I paused, erased it, and wrote one word instead. Fine. I didn't owe anyone the play-by-play. Not anymore. I set the phone down and reached for the folder again. Red ink. Crumpled corners. I wasn't going to frame it. I wasn't going to keep it. But I wasn't throwing it away either. Not yet. Because I had a decision to make. One I'd been postponing for years. And I was tired of postponing. I stood slowly, slipping the folder back into my bag like I was tucking away a wound that hadn't finished bleeding. The coffee was still full. Cold. Forgotten. I left it there. The barista didn't notice me leave, and I didn't need him to. The March wind slapped my face as I stepped outside again, but this time I welcomed it. It cleared the fog behind my eyes, reminded me that shame is only permanent if you let it settle into your bones. I didn't walk home. I turned around. 2 blocks. 7 red lights. One voice in my head, repeating, "You're not finished." The receptionist blinked when I re-entered the lobby of Orion Logic. Miss Cross, she said, standing. "Is everything all right?" I buttoned my blazer. Slowly, calmly, like armor. "I'm here for the open assessment round," I said. She hesitated. Her eyes searched my face, as if looking for a crack in my conviction. Then she picked up the phone. "Please hold." I waited in silence, my hand steady against the marble counter. Behind me, the digital directory glowed with names that didn't belong to people like me. Not yet. After a pause, she hung up the phone and nodded. "You may go up." The elevator took longer this time, or maybe I just had more thoughts between floors. By the time the doors opened again on the 14th, The tension hit me like static in the air before a storm. The glass walls of the conference room came into view. So did the panel. They were still seated, Miles, Nina, Jordan, and Aubrey. She was laughing again, a low, amused chuckle mid-conversation with Miles. Until she saw me. Her face didn't fall. Not quite. She smirked. "Changed your mind?" she asked, the words laced with silk. "You never were good at letting go." I didn't answer. I walked to the same chair I hadn't been offered earlier, pulled it out myself, sat down. Greg glanced at the others, then leaned back with exaggerated curiosity. "Well then, since you're so eager to be here, how about we put that brain to use?" He signaled to the assistant. A thick test packet landed in front of me with a heavy thud. "Paper," he said. "Not digital. No calculators. No questions. You have 15 minutes. Starting now." I nodded once, picked up the pen, and began. The questions came at me like a wall of static, logic chains, systems optimization, data reconstruction under constraint. I didn't hesitate, not because it was easy, but because I knew what it meant to be underestimated. I knew how to work with silence. I'd built a career in the spaces no one bothered to look. Somewhere behind me, someone sipped coffee. Aubrey's chair creaked. She leaned toward Nina and muttered, "Let's see if her little sociology-adjacent AI hobby gets her anywhere now." I didn't flinch. I didn't look up. When I finished the final question, my wrist was aching. My breath came sharp, but there were no crossed-out answers, no smudges, just precision. I pushed the packet across the table. Greg didn't even fake politeness. He flipped through the first few pages, unimpressed, like he was reviewing an amateur's screenplay. Then, slowly, theatrically, he tore the entire packet in half. The sound, paper ripping, was louder than any voice in that room. The room froze. The pieces fluttered into the trash can beside him like broken wings. "Impressive penmanship," he muttered, "but we don't hire fiction writers." Someone behind me snorted. I didn't look to see who. I stayed seated, hands folded in my lap. My spine didn't bend. Aubrey tilted her head. "You always were stubborn," she said softly. "Never learned when to quit." I rose, walked to the trash can, and knelt. One by one, I picked up the torn pages, not to salvage them, not for proof, but because I wanted to remember this exact moment. The feel of the answers they didn't read. The weight of a silence weaponized. As I reached for the final page, a pointed heel kicked it away, pinning it under a chair leg. Aubrey leaned forward, her voice a whisper that still sliced through the air, still crawling for approval. I looked up at her and smiled, not because I was okay, but because I was no longer asking. By the time I stepped out of that room again, the air had changed. Not outside, Minneapolis was still bleak and gray, but inside me, something had clicked into place. Not confidence, exactly. Something colder, cleaner. The soft parts had burned away. I didn't go home. Not yet. Instead, I walked the block and a half to a printing center tucked between a parking ramp and a boarded-up bakery. It took 15 minutes to run the files, reprint the evidence. My name was on every page, metadata intact. Server logs, design blueprints, collaboration chains, proof of what I had built and how much they had ignored. By 11 a.m., I was back in the Orion Logic lobby. The receptionist looked up, startled for the third time. "I need to speak to the panel again," I said, voice low but firm. "Now." "They're in a closed session," she started, then caught my eye. She didn't finish her sentence. She just nodded and reached for the phone. Within minutes, I was being escorted back upstairs. No badge this time. No greeting. Just the cold click of my heels and the thud of my heart. The conference room looked exactly the same, but the energy had shifted. You could feel it. Thin smiles, tightened jaws. Even Miles tapped his pen a little too fast. Aubrey didn't bother to hide her smirk. "You really don't know when to quit, do you?" she said, folding her arms. I stepped forward. I'm not here to beg, I said. I came because you left something out. Laura, one of the HR reps, narrowed her eyes. What exactly? My record. My work. The things that actually matter. I placed the folder on the table and opened it, sliding the documents forward without looking at anyone directly. You're interrupting a confidential review, Miles began. But then the door behind me opened. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I felt the shift before I heard the reaction. Chairs scooting back, feet shuffling, voices cutting off mid-sentence. Graham Everhart stepped into the room like a quiet force of gravity. He wore black, no tie, sharp as a shadow, calm as a man who had nothing to prove. Everyone stood, even Aubrey. Her voice cracked before her face did. Mr. Everhart, I mean. Graham? Wait, Coulter. But Graham didn't look at her. He looked at me. He touched the center of my back, lightly, just enough for me to feel it. You okay? He asked, only loud enough for me to hear. Only me, I said softly. Then he turned to the panel. You all seem to know me very well, he said, scanning the room with eyes like mirrors. Greg cleared his throat. Sir, if we'd known she was qualified. Graham cut in. Or human. He moved to the head of the table and began to lay out the documents I'd just placed, page by page, metric by metric. Lana Cross, freelance architect on 3 of our internal compliance systems, co-authored the ethics framework for our AI risk module in 2021, the same one some of you still struggle to explain to clients. The color drained from Greg's face. Laura leaned in. Miles went very, very still. Graham slid one photo across the table. This is the metrics report you used last quarter. Her work. Not signed, but hers. He turned to me. Anything you'd like to add? I looked around the room, at the faces that had dismissed me, at Aubrey, whose lips had parted just slightly, like a punchline had died on her tongue. I wasn't here to ask for a favor, I said. I showed up because I believed I had value. Then I nodded toward the table. Turns out I had more than that. I had proof. You just didn't bother to see it. Aubrey opened her mouth, but this time nothing came out. Graham's voice dropped into something colder than steel. I believe this warrants a formal review of interview practices, compliance, conduct. Greg stammered. It was informal, exploratory, not binding. Oh. Graham said almost pleasantly, then you won't mind if we play back the footage. He gestured to the mounted screen on the wall. The remote sat in front of him. No one moved. No one even pretended to object. The screen flickered, and the silence that filled the room as the video began wasn't just uncomfortable. It was damning. The screen flickered, then stabilized. There I was, frozen in digital clarity, standing at the center of the conference room, placing my resume in front of Aubrey. The camera caught everything. The dismissive flick of her wrist, the way she passed it like a discarded menu, the tight smirk she gave Miles, then her voice, clear as crystal in the audio feed. She still dresses like she shops in college clearance bins. A quiet gasp escaped from someone in the room. Maybe Laura, maybe the legal rep on Zoom. No one said a word. The footage continued. Aubrey interrupting my credentials. Greg flipping through my test packet like he was looking for a joke. Then, frame by frame, the moment he tore it in half, the audible rip echoing in the speakers like judgment carved into wood. And then the whisper. You'll always be beneath me, darling. You know that, right? It hit like a gavel. The air collapsed. The tension in the room was a living thing now, pressing against every wall, every shoulder. No one could look away, not even Aubrey. Her face had gone pale, lips drawn, eyes darting toward every corner but mine. The video ended in silence. Even the hum of the ventilation sounded like a verdict. Then a voice broke through, flat, steady, from the far end of the table. This isn't just bad judgment, said the legal advisor. This is a liability. HR and compliance need to be looped in today. Greg opened his mouth, as if to salvage something, his image, perhaps, but Aubrey beat him to it. She planned this, she snapped, her voice cracking into a shout. She wanted it all on record. Heads turned. Even the assistant looked up. This was calculated, Aubrey hissed. Manipulation. She manipulated all of you. Her voice pitched too high, too fast. I said nothing. That silence, it rattled her more than any retort I could have delivered. She pointed straight at me like I was a virus. I introduced you to him, she barked. To Graham. I brought you into this room. And now you're acting like I'm the villain. I raised an eyebrow. My voice, when I finally spoke, was quiet. Final. Yes, I said. You introduced me to him. And when he chose me, you made sure no one else did. Gasps again. Graham turned to her, slowly, as if giving her one last exit. You admit you interfered with her employment? He asked, his voice low and sharp. I was protecting the company, she shot back. You don't understand. She clung to me for years. She only got here because of me. The only nepotism here, I said, eyes still on her, was you protecting yourself from ever being compared to someone you never thought would rise. Laura quietly slid her notepad away from her. Greg looked at the table. No one spoke up for Aubrey. No one even moved. Aubrey's voice dropped into a murmur, almost to herself now. I wasn't trying to destroy you. No, I replied without blinking. You were trying to erase me. And still she didn't stop. She lunged again, this time toward the edge of the table, grabbing her phone and slamming it down. She's not innocent, she shouted. Look at this. This is what she sent to a client last year, called her a walking disaster in heels. On screen, a fabricated email. My name, my signature, even my company tag. Except, I already knew about it. I calmly reached into my bag, pulled out a small black binder, and slid it forward to the legal team. That email, I said evenly, originated from her IP address, logged in under her temporary admin pass from 2 nights ago. Here's the server log. Dead silence. No shock now, just confirmation. Graham didn't blink. He looked at Aubrey. Forging internal credentials to defame a team member is more than unethical, he said. You'll be hearing from legal. Effective immediately, you are dismissed. Aubrey's jaw clenched. Her face flushed red. Security entered, silent, swift. And yet, before she left, she tried one last time. You think you're better than me now, she hissed, her voice cracking. Just because he picked you? I looked at her directly, and for the first time in over a decade, I didn't feel small. No, I said. I'm just done being beneath you. Security didn't drag her. They didn't have to, because the room was already done with her. And for once, so was I. When the door closed behind her, it wasn't a bang. It was a hush, the kind that follows truth when it's finally spoken aloud. Graham stood motionless for a second longer, his fingers resting lightly on the closed binder. Then he turned back to the room, now quiet, now watching. I move that we reinstate Lana Cross, he said simply. Effective immediately. Full time. With project lead authority. His tone wasn't emotional. It wasn't proud. It was policy, and that made it even more powerful. All in favor. Laura's hand went up first, almost like reflex. Then Miles. Then Jordan. Then the legal advisor. Then the assistant, who hadn't even looked at me 2 hours ago. Every hand rose. No one objected. Nina, the HR rep, cleared her throat and stood. You're being offered lead strategy consultant for the ethics compliance wing, she said, her voice more composed now. The role was previously occupied by, she didn't finish. My eyes flicked toward the corner glass office, the one overlooking the city skyline. Aubrey's old throne. Nina gestured slightly. It's yours. I didn't hesitate. No, I said. I'd like a desk near the development floor, closer to the team. A pause, then a few nods. surprised, maybe impressed. Graham's eyes met mine, and he smiled, not the public kind, the quiet kind that says, "I see you." I stepped forward, reached for the contract, and signed my name in ink that didn't shake. Just before I stepped away, Laura slid a small, folded note toward me across the table. I hesitated, then opened it. In her soft handwriting, it read, "We're glad you're finally where you've always belonged." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I just smiled and walked out, this time with my head high and my name intact. The elevator down felt different, lighter, not because the fight was over, but because I wasn't carrying doubt anymore. That weight, it had belonged to her, to years of being gaslit, belittled, repackaged as support. I wasn't fragile. I was forged. Outside, the sun had broken through the clouds. It wasn't warm, but it was enough. I walked 3 blocks before realizing I was still holding the torn test packet in my hand. I stopped in front of a quiet bookstore, stepped under the awning, and opened my bag. Inside was a thin roll of clear tape. I hadn't known why I brought it until that moment. I sat on the edge of the planter and began to tape the pieces back together, not to repair it, but to remember it. Every rip, every stroke of red ink, every attempt to erase me. When I returned to the office later that afternoon, my office now modest, sunlit, tucked between the UX team and back-end devs, I pinned the paper to the corkboard beside my desk. It looked like a scar, and that felt right, because scars aren't shame. They're receipts. Proof you paid the price. Proof you survived. My phone buzzed. A message from Dad. I didn't see everything before. "I'm sorry." I stared at the screen for a full minute, then locked it and set it down. Not out of spite, just clarity, because I didn't owe him a reply. And he didn't get to rewrite the story just because I finally stood up in it. The rest of the day passed in a rhythm I hadn't known in years. Productive, steady mine. No whispers, no smirks, no waiting to be seen. Just the sound of keyboards, the click of shared files, and the gentle hum of a team rebuilding something real. By mid-afternoon, I was unpacking the last of my things into the shallow drawers of my new desk. A ceramic pencil holder, a tiny brass bird from my mother years ago, the photo of my dog, long gone now, but always with me in the corner of my frame, and, of course, taped to the corkboard beside my new access badge, the resume they once folded in half. The red ink still bled faintly through the paper, like a ghost refusing to fade. I didn't cover it. I didn't hide it, because that resume wasn't just a document anymore. It was the receipt for every lesson I had paid for in silence. A knock at the door broke my thoughts. She stood in the hallway, nervous, uncertain, barely older than 23, clutching a resume so tightly to her chest it was already wrinkled at the corners. I remembered her from the glass wall, the way her eyes had followed the manager without recognition, the way they had landed on me like a lifeline. Now here she was, called back, just like I'd told her she would be. "They said I could meet the project lead," she said breathlessly. "That it's you." I smiled. It wasn't triumphant. It was peaceful. "Yes. Come in," I said, waving her to the chair across from me. She stepped forward, careful, shoulders tense like she was waiting for the floor to open beneath her. I recognized the posture, because I had worn it like armor for years. "I don't know if I'm qualified," she blurted out. That sentence landed differently now. So differently. I looked her in the eye. "You showed up," I said. "You kept showing up. That matters more than anyone here tells you." She didn't smile exactly, but her shoulders dropped slightly. Hope doesn't come loud. Sometimes it just sighs. We talked. About systems theory, about team culture, about the gaps between resumes and reality. She asked good questions, better ones than I had asked when I first sat in that same chair, years ago, being told I was kind and nothing else. When she left, she smiled in that way only people do when they're not fully sure they're allowed to believe in themselves yet. And that's when I knew. It wasn't about Aubrey anymore. It never really had been. It was about all the rooms we let others keep us out of, all the places we were told we had to earn, all the chairs we were never offered, so we built our own and sat down anyway. I glanced at the board one last time. The torn test packet fluttered in the air from the vent. It looked like history, no longer failure, just firewood. Before I left that night, I took one last thing out of my bag. A napkin, old, wrinkled, faded. It had once been stuffed in my coat pocket after a failed pitch meeting back in 2020. I had written something on it in pen that was nearly dried out. Something I wasn't sure I believed at the time. No one sees the quiet builder until the building outlasts the storm. I pinned it above the resume, two truths side by side. Then I turned off the desk lamp. The room dimmed into a soft, golden hush, the kind of light that forgives sharp corners, the kind that feels like a beginning. Outside, Minneapolis pulsed with quiet movement. Cars hummed. Someone shouted across the street. A bus exhaled at the corner. And I walked out, not faster, not slower, just steady, like someone who finally understood that strength doesn't always look like fire. Sometimes it's the refusal to go cold.